1/3 of all murder cases in America remain open.
He had told me that if I opened my eyes, he would slit my throat.
Each one is called a cold case.
The DNA evidence taken from the victim was a match. The Linden rapist was at it again.
Based on the hit A&E television program.
A phone call is placed, one that changes a family's life forever.
Cold Case Files, the podcast.
You could see the fire in his eyes. He screamed at me, "You want it? Get your tape recorder out."
Get new episodes of Cold Case Files every Tuesday on Podcast One, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 276 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
Doing very, very well. I'm actually having a really good week and a half.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm feeling very creative, very pumped up. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
You ever get in those moods where you just feel like you're ready to do something?
Yeah.
You have a burst of energy. You're getting a bunch of ideas. It's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay. Make it happen.
We'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
It may not go anywhere, but that's the way I'm feeling. Let's go ahead and give our shout outs. For Patreon, we had Samuel Griffiths.
Hey, Samuel.
Jennifer Mendez Fisher jumped out to our highest level.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Becky Neiman.
Hey, Becky.
April Dees.
What's going on, Dees?
Amy.
Hey, Amy.
Amy Davis.
Hey, Amy Davis.
Okay. Thought you had more to come after that.
Hey, Amy. Number 2.
Number 2. Bianca Pohl.
What's going on, Bianca?
Ashley Stratton.
Hey, Stratton.
Paul Van Rensburg.
What's up, Van Rensburg?
Summer Nash.
Hey, Nash.
Ashley McKinney.
Well, appreciate that, Ashley.
Katie Skibby.
Oh, man, I like that Skibby name.
Shedder Leslie.
Hey, Leslie.
Alicia Lavelle.
What's going on, Lavelle?
Daniel Ramsey.
Hey, Ramsey.
Andrew Ramsey.
Man, another Ramsey.
Pretty hard not to believe they're related.
Exactly.
Heather Taylor.
Hey, Heather.
Debbie Tapp.
Appreciate that, Debbie.
Nakia Trullier.
Or Trawler.
Okay, let's go with that.
Yeah.
But it's a fishing vessel, right? But let's go with it. Mary Moore.
Hey, Mary.
Tish Millette.
What's going on, Tish?
And last but not least, Lan Chow Clements.
Well, thanks, Clements.
Yeah, appreciate all the new support. And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Fallon.
Appreciate that, Fallon.
Yeah, appreciate all the support. We even had some great PayPal donations from Torrin Rasmussen.
Awesome. Thanks, Torrin.
Lauren Porter.
Hey, Lauren.
And Patty Fortner.
Appreciate that, Patty.
So thank you to everyone who chooses to support the show. It means a lot. Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we're headed out to Salt Lake City, Utah, to discuss Matthew Breck and the murder of Anna Palmer. So this was a murder that shook up a community. It went unsolved for, a decade or so. And then DNA finally nabbed the perpetrator.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's out there. Check that one out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
Man, I'm ready.
We're talking about the mysterious death of Frank Olson. On November 28th, 1953, CIA scientist Dr. Frank Olson fell to his death from the 13th floor of the hotel where he was staying. Olson's death was initially ruled a suicide until 1994, when a second autopsy was carried out. And this is where, a lot of questions emerged. And really, there are a lot of questions.
Sure.
In this case. Was Olson ashamed of the work he had performed for the CIA, or had he become a liability and a security risk to the agency, which meant that he had to be taken care of? Now, right up front, a lot of the information for this episode came from two books. One book is The Poisoner-in-Chief, Sidney Gottlieb and the CIA Search for Mind Control by Stephen Kinzer. And the other is a book called Criminal Poisoning: Clinical and Forensic Perspectives by Christopher Holstedge. Dr. Frank Olson was a biological warfare scientist employed by the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA for short.
Yeah. I wonder what that screening process is like.
To become a biological warfare scientist? Well, first of all, I'm pretty sure you have to have a very deep background in science.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that you go straight from 7-Eleven to the CIA and say, you know what, I'd like to be a biological warfare scientist.
Sign me up for that.
And I'm not putting down anybody that works for 7-Eleven or any convenience store. I'm just saying it sounds like a very technical job.
Yeah.
And I think it would require a very specific education.
You ever seen those Slurpee machines they have at 7-Eleven?
Well, I know there's a lot to it.
There is. Especially if you want to mix flavors.
On November 28th, 1953, the 43-year-old Olson fell to his death from the 13th floor of the Statler Hotel in New York City at approximately 2:30 a.m. The window in Olson's room was found to be closed, with the window pane shattered. When police investigators arrived, his death was ruled a suicide. So we'll come back to Olson, his early years, how he got to the CIA, all of that stuff. But right now I want to talk about 1974, because in that year, the New York Times accused the CIA of crimes against Americans, including illegal experiments conducted on U.S. citizens, alleged to have taken place in the 60s. In response to these allegations, in 1975, the President's Commission on CIA Activities within the U.S. was set up by then Vice President Nelson Rockefeller and subsequently referred to as the Rockefeller Commission to investigate the claims of wrongdoing by the CIA. The resulting report publicized the activities of the project known as MK-Ultra, which detailed secret mind control techniques carried out against American citizens against their will and without their consent. 3 additional congressional committees would also play a part in investigating these events. And I think a lot of people have probably heard of MK-Ultra. It's been featured in a number of movies.
It has.
I think on Patreon, I brought up the movie about Chuck Barris with Sam Rockwell playing Chuck Barris.
Yeah.
And I had watched it maybe just a month or two ago. And, you know, it's a good movie, but really gets into, you know, him working with the CIA and some really kind of strange events. But MK-Ultra comes up in quite a number of movies and has over however many of the last decades. The Rockefeller report also revealed that Dr. Frank Olson was unknowingly dosed with LSD just 9 days before his death. And that's where the case stood for several decades. In 1994, Dr. Olson's son, Eric, was burying his mother, and he wanted his father buried next to her. So he had his body exhumed. During the exhumation, Eric Olson had a second autopsy performed on his father's body. And inconsistencies, if not downright signs of foul play, were discovered. So we'll get into all of that, but kind of setting the scene for this whole thing. And then we'll go back and talk about Frank Olson. Frank Olson was born in 1910. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in 1938 and earned his PhD in biochemistry in 1942, both from the University of Wisconsin.
Man, the biochemistry classes are interesting.
Yeah. So this guy had a very similar educational background to you. You know, the PhDs and what is some really heady stuff.
Well, it's important to have correct PhD
levels in your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
And as a PhD, you would know that. In 1940, he married fellow student Alice Wicks. After receiving his doctorate, Olson went to work for Purdue University in Indiana, while simultaneously serving as a captain in the Army Chemical Corps. Then in 1943, Dr. Olson was recruited by a newly established top secret U.S. chemical and biological warfare research center in Frederick, Maryland, known as Camp Dietrich. He was the first civilian scientist employed there. And by all accounts, he excelled in his position. He specialized in an aerosolized form of anthrax.
Okay. This guy is very, very smart.
I think you would have to be extremely smart to work with anthrax because we know how deadly it is.
Yeah.
You know, those of us who lived through the anthrax scare where people were opening up their mail and you know, it contained anthrax, and it was like every business you worked at, nobody wanted to open the mail.
No, except you made me open all the mail.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, but you made me do it.
Again, somebody's got to do it.
Okay.
But that was powder form, right? We're talking about aerosol.
Right.
Spray. Can you imagine having a spray can that contained anthrax and the ability to walk by somebody on the street and just spray it right in their face?
Yeah.
And kill them. Now, I don't put anything past some of these 3-letter government agencies. They've come up with a lot of stuff.
They sure have.
Over the years.
That we know about, and there's things we still don't know about.
That are probably even scarier.
Yeah.
According to his family, Frank Olson was a good man with a strong conscience who did not intend to hurt anyone with his work. He merely wanted to serve his country and believed that that's what he was doing with his research at Camp Dietrich. He appeared to have good intentions, and his patriotism was co-opted by the government in response to various military situations in Russia and China particularly. And I just wonder how many people fit that exact same description. You want to serve your country, many people.
Right.
This guy's really smart. Hey, I'm getting a job where I can really be of benefit, of service to my country. And unknowingly, maybe in some situations, the work that they do is kind of taken and used for something that maybe they wouldn't be so proud of or happy with.
Yeah, I think they'd probably be shocked to learn what that was used for. Some of them.
Well, if they find out that it's used to kill people, okay, maybe not everybody's on board with that. In 1949, Olson was suspected of divulging state secrets and was interrogated by government operatives. It was also recorded that he had some run-ins with the military police on the base, although the records don't really specify exactly what these run-ins detailed. Olson's roommate and close friend, Norman Cornoyer, said Olson really didn't fit the traditional military personality because he was extremely outspoken and opinionated.
Yeah, that typically wouldn't fly in a military situation.
No, it's not really what the military looks for, I don't believe.
Right. They have a system in place.
Yeah. Don't question. We don't want your opinions. This is what we want you to do. It's kind of like when you work for me. I don't really care what you have to say. This is what I need you to do. Open all these letters, which may or may not contain anthrax.
Yes, that still hasn't changed.
No. Yeah, it hasn't changed today.
I don't know why I still open up your own personal mail on this table over
just
here
in case.
with viscreen around it to keep it all enclosed. I don't understand.
Just in case. But all joking aside, the military does kind of have a certain order to it.
Sure.
And outspokenness, opinionated type of people don't really fit well. Olson apparently liked to speak out about his views, and he didn't really have a problem mincing words. And it didn't matter who he was speaking to, whether it was an MP or just some guy sitting next to him in a bar, he was going to say whatever was on his mind. After he was interrogated, it was recommended that Olson be supervised at all times, but especially at work, as he was believed to be a potential security risk, something that Olson didn't like because he was kind of an independent person.
Yeah, I can't imagine anybody wanting to be supervised at work all the time, let alone outside of work, to have someone looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, people aren't into that. But here's the thing. If this guy is working with deadly substances and he's a potential security risk, why would you let him continue working on some of that stuff? Basically, you're saying, we're going to let him keep doing it, but we're going to keep a really close eye on him. According to articles in the New York Times Magazine and The Guardian, in April 1950, it's believed that Frank was recruited to work for the CIA because he was given a diplomatic passport, which was said to be very unusual for a civilian army scientist. Around this time, the government was conducting secret tests. These tests involved using drugs such as LSD and other chemicals and torture techniques to interrogate prisoners. During this year, 1950, Frank also made numerous trips to Europe, especially to an army interrogation center in Germany called Camp King.
There's always a lot of talk about LSD back in those days, you know?
Well, because apparently they used it for a lot of shady stuff. I mean, this is not the Timothy Leary, what is it? Drop out, tune in, tune off, turn off. I forget the saying. It was like 3 lines and I can't remember what he said, but a lot of people were using LSD, in the 60s to expand their mind and this and that. Okay. Here in the 50s, it's, the CIA is using it to interrogate people, but they're really giving this guy kind of a cloak and dagger mystique here.
They are.
He's got this diplomatic passport, which they're saying was unusual for a person in his position. They're saying that he made a number of trips to this interrogation center in Germany.
And I believe that there's some benefits to having a diplomatic passport, such as diplomatic immunity.
Well, at least in one of the lethal weapons, I know it was a big deal. Because the bad guy had diplomatic immunity. They had a hard time touching him.
That's right. You can't get me because I have this.
I don't know how it related to a diplomatic passport, but I'm going to assume you know what you're talking about, which normally gets me in trouble.
I also have diplomatic immunity.
Not from getting stuff right in this podcast, you don't.
That's true.
According to a video by WorldLink titled Project Artichoke, the CIA's secret experiments on humans. In August 1951, the government began Project Bluebird, a research project to investigate the use of interrogation techniques, which included drugs, chemicals, and torture to extract information from individuals. In August of that year, Project Bluebird switched to Project Artichoke, which was the predecessor to the more well-known MK Ultra. Who's coming up with these names? Project Bluebird, okay. That rolls off the tongue. Project Artichoke.
Were they at the grocery store or something? Yeah. You're like, I got to come up with a new name by tomorrow.
Let's just go with Project Brussels Sprouts and be done with it. So from what I understand, Project Artichoke aimed to use hypnosis to induce amnesia with the aid of drugs, chemicals, and certain brainwashing techniques. As part of the project leaders recruited New York magician John Mulholland to teach hypnosis and sleight of hand techniques so their agents could slip drugs, such as LSD, unobserved to their targets so they could interrogate them afterward.
And I'd love to be able to learn how to do hypnosis.
To hypnotize who?
You're getting sleepy.
I'm not.
Very sleepy.
I'm not the one who closes my eyes on the Patreon videos.
Watch me with my watch swinging back and forth.
Yeah.
No?
No.
Okay.
Doesn't work on me. But if you think about it, who better than a really top-notch sleight of hand magician to teach agents how to, do some of this stuff, drop drugs and drinks and different things like that.
Yeah. I mean, he's the expert. That's where you want to go.
True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rates and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Starward Whiskey is the most awarded whiskey that you've never heard of. That's right, Starward was named the most awarded distillery of the year at the 2022 San Francisco World Spirits Competition. That's a big win for a little distiller. Gibby and I have both tried it. We love it. And after we aired our first ad a couple of weeks ago, we actually got a voicemail from a listener who encountered Starward and raved about it. Starward makes deliciously versatile modern whiskeys made for today's curious drinker. They're sippable and they're mixable. Their distillery is in the heart of Melbourne, Australia, home to lovers of food, flavor, and adventure. And that's part of what makes this whiskey different. Starward pushes the boundaries of what whiskey can be. I'm really into their twofold double grain whiskey. It is very tasty. But don't take my word for it. Be the judge for yourself. Give Starward's award-winning whiskeys a try and get $20 off your order using the code UNSOLVED. Visit starward.com, that's STARWARD.com, and get $20 off your order. Shipped straight to your door using the code UNSOLVED. Starward.com, code UNSOLVED. Sip Starward responsibly. Cheers.
How much is an hour of your time worth? Whether you're a realtor, lawyer, accountant, or even a content creator, Stamps.com gives you the ability to focus your time on what you do best, not on tedious mailing and shipping tasks. Print stamps, shipping labels, or certified mail forms in seconds. More than 4 million customers have relied on Stamps.com to make their lives easier. Go to Stamps.com/audio for a special offer. No contract, cancel anytime. That's Stamps.com/audio.
Toward the end of 1951, Frank returned home from Camp King noticeably depressed. In an interview, his son Eric later said that the more successful he was, the more depressed Frank became, because according to Eric, it meant killing a lab full of monkeys.
Yeah, that can't be something to feel good about.
No. I hate to hear that.
Absolutely. Me too. And you think, he's developing this new chemical or whatever he's doing, and the only way they can know that it works, they've got to try it out on something.
Yeah. But I love monkeys.
I love all animals. Yeah, monkeys. Frank
told his wife that if Germany had prevailed in World War II, America would have been prosecuted for war crimes. In June 1952, Frank Olson made numerous trips to Frankfurt, Germany, and was photographed with several known CIA operatives and agents. He was there as part of a project to conduct tests on Russians and Germans using chemicals, drugs, torture, and hypnosis to interrogate them and extract information, along with subjugating their will and trying to make them receptive and submissive using these new techniques. This time when he returned from Europe, Olson was noticeably more depressed than he was after previous trips. He told his friend Norman they used all kinds of drugs and chemicals. They didn't care whether they lived or died. You would be stunned how they made them talk.
It's one thing to be a scientist and develop these amazing chemicals and reactions and things like that. I would think that would be amazing, right? To see your work actually do something, until you find out that it's going to be used in such a way
to hurt people.
To hurt people.
Yeah.
At that point, I don't know if the shock and awe would be there, or just the disappointment, or maybe just a combination of all that.
Well, I mean, look at a guy like Oppenheimer. The nuclear capabilities.
Yeah.
The stuff that he did was amazing.
Sure.
But from my understanding, he was traumatized for the rest of his life, knowing what it was ultimately used for. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it haunted him.
Well, to know that your discovery, your developments led to the deaths of a lot of people, that would be hard to sleep at night.
It would weigh on you, for sure. In 1953, Project Artichoke morphed into MK Ultra. The purpose of MK Ultra was to create Manchurian candidates who would carry out remote-controlled assassinations. I'm sure many people have read the book, seen the movies. They've made, at least 2. I know the remake had Denzel in it.
I don't remember who was in the first one.
I don't either, but it was a very good movie, the first one. And then they remade it. And then they also did a parody of it in Naked Gun, where Reggie Jackson was essentially a Manchurian candidate.
Okay. Yeah.
But no doubt in this program, mind-altering drugs such as LSD, as well as hypnosis, were highly emphasized. Project MK Ultra was controlled by the chief of the chemical division of the CIA Technical Services Staff, a man named Sidney Gottlieb. According to an article by NPR, in June of 1953, Frank Olson went on vacation with members of his extended family. His brother-in-law noticed that he was uncharacteristically withdrawn and depressed, which was unlike him, right? We mentioned previously he had been outspoken. He had a spirited personality. The family believed that his job was getting to him, and it seemed to have affected him significantly.
I don't know how it couldn't.
The following month, in July 1953, Olson reportedly went to Paris, England, Scandinavia, and Morocco. In a small town outside of Paris, it's been theorized that MK Ultra operatives used a crop duster aircraft to chemically dose the entire town with mind-altering drugs, killing a bunch of people and sending a whole bunch more to a mental institution. And allegedly, Frank Olson was involved in this experiment due to his expertise in aerosolized chemicals. It's been written that Olson's son Eric came across some old films his father took during his travels abroad. He discovered one that showed that in August 1953, Olson made an undocumented trip to a military safe house in Berlin, Germany, and allegedly this trip was undocumented on Frank's passport. It's been floated out there that while in Berlin, Frank watched the application of the many drugs and chemicals he developed, paired with brainwashing techniques, a powerful and effective combination. And then upon returning home after this trip, Frank allegedly confided to his close friend, Norman Cornoyer, that he wanted to quit working for the CIA and he wanted nothing more to do with any of these projects. He said he couldn't take it anymore and he was just trying to figure a way out.
Well, again, I'm sure it was probably hard for him to sleep at night.
Yeah, it sounds to me that he was uncomfortable, and that's probably not even the right word, with the things that he was seeing, or the way that some of his work had been taken and was being utilized. I don't think he was comfortable with it. According to reports by the Rockefeller Commission in 1975, on Thursday, November 19th, 1953, Olson left his home in Frederick, Maryland, for a secret meeting at Deep Creek Lake Retreat in Western Maryland with 9 individuals, 5 from the Special Operations Division and 4 from the Technical Services staff of the CIA. Sidney Gottlieb and his assistant Robert Lashbrook were in attendance. On the first evening, Frank Olson was unknowingly dosed with LSD that was slipped into a glass of alcohol. 4 others in attendance were also similarly drugged. When he got home from Deep Creek the following day, his family noted that Frank was withdrawn. He was depressed, even more than what had become usual for him. But his family wouldn't learn of the reason why until 1975. But apparently Olson knew what had been done to him. He knew that the CIA had used some of these techniques that we've been talking about on him. Ike Feldman, a former CIA member, later said that Frank was not drugged because he was a security risk, but because the CIA was conducting self-testing.
Self-testing, huh?
Yeah. Sign me out of that one.
Doesn't normally self-testing mean that you, as the self, know it?
That you're being tested?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is secretive, I guess.
Have you done any self-testing I'm not aware of on me? Besides, I do remember that one time you did it with those gummy bears.
Yeah, that was some shady testing. I'll admit to that.
I don't know if that's the right S word, but it was, yeah.
It was shady.
Yeah.
On Saturday and Sunday, November 21st and 22nd, Olson told his wife, Alice, that he had made a terrible mistake. He promised that he would explain later what he meant by that, but unfortunately, he never got the chance. He said he wanted to quit his job and go back to school to train to be a dentist. Okay, I get it. You're not happy doing what you're doing. You want to take an alternate career path.
Right.
Dentistry might be a lot safer than working for the CIA and being tested on.
Right.
Without your consent.
What you get to worry about there is just that laughing gas.
What, accidentally putting it on yourself?
Yeah.
The following Monday, the 23rd, Frank saw his boss, Vint Ruett, at Camp Dietrich, and he told him that he wanted to quit. Ruett tried to talk him out of this decision, telling him, hey, you're doing a fabulous job, telling him how important the work was to national security and to the country. So obviously this guy was valued.
Sure.
He was smart. He was good at what he did,
right,
because they didn't want to let him go, which is pretty much the sign that you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, they'll just say, hey, that's cool. Wish you all the luck in the world on your future endeavors.
We're good with that.
We're good with that.
I just wonder how hard it would be to exit an agency like that.
Well, my assumption is the more secrets you know, the higher clearance you have, the harder it would be. That's just my guess. On the 24th, Frank reported to work, but he left at 10 a.m. and was taken home by a special ops driver. Olson told Alice that his boss told him that there's a chance that he might become violent. He also told her that he was being sent to New York to be debriefed. It's also been reported that he believed that this being sent to New York was also to protect his family from any emerging violent tendencies as a result of him being dosed with LSD.
Yeah, I guess you don't know what the come down or whatever the terminology is when you finally come down off of this dose.
According to CIA documents uncovered in 1975 by the Rockefeller Commission, on November 24th, 1953, Olson, Ruett, and Lashbrook traveled to New York, where Olson had his first meeting with Dr. Harold Abramson, a medical doctor employed by the CIA. Dr. Abramson's training was as an allergist and a pediatrician, but apparently he was assisting the CIA with their research into psychotropic medications and the effects of LSD.
That's a little bit different than allergist and pediatrician.
Yeah, okay, allergist, maybe I understand there's some correlation there. Pediatrician, I don't understand at all. The next day, on the 25th, Olson was taken by Ruett and Lashbrook to meet with this guy, John Mulholland, the magician, who specialized in hypnosis and sleight of hand. Apparently, the two guys didn't get along very well. Ruett later reported that he and Lashbrook wanted to take Olson back to Camp Dietrich, but Olson didn't want to go. He said that he wanted to spend the Thanksgiving holiday with his family, but he was afraid that he might become violent. So he elected to return to New York to see Dr. Abramson again.
Well, we know that Frank is not afraid to say what's on his mind. So if he didn't like somebody, if he didn't want to do something, he wasn't going to be quiet about it.
No, he was outspoken. We know that. Apparently, Ruett returned to Camp Dietrich by himself, and he told Alice that Frank wasn't going to make it back to Maryland in time for Thanksgiving. Olson and Lashbrook stayed in New York City, and they had Thanksgiving dinner in a Midtown Manhattan restaurant. On Friday the 27th, Dr. Abramson saw Olson in his room at the Statler Hotel, and he gave him a dose of Nimbutal, a barbiturate used to depress the central nervous system. It's often used to treat insomnia, but he also gave him a glass of bourbon, which I always thought was a no-no.
Yeah, I did too, but maybe he's like, here, take this, drink this, and yeah, you're going to sleep.
Well, some have speculated that the drink given to Olson may have been dosed with other substances. According to Lashbrook, at 10:30 a.m., he woke up to find Frank standing in the middle of the room, and he was unresponsive when Lashbrook tried to talk to him. Then Olson ran across the room 1013A, and he threw himself through the closed window from the 13th floor of the hotel. Now, Lashbrook would later give a second account of what happened, which was slightly different from the first. In his second story, he said that he woke up to find Frank running across the room, and then he dove out the window. So this story didn't include him trying to talk to Frank before Frank jumped out the window. But Lashbrook was in the room when the police arrived. The hotel manager heard the sound of breaking glass. He went outside to investigate. This guy reported that Frank survived for a few moments and was trying to speak, but all he could get out were some incoherent grunts. He also described the scene. Frank had blood coming from every orifice on his face. Gibbs, you jump out of a 13th floor window, 13 stories.
Yeah.
That's a brutal landing.
Yeah, there's nothing good going to come out of falling 13 floors.
No, absolutely not. Frank died within seconds of landing on the ground. The manager said that he looked up from where Frank had fallen and noted that the blinds to the room were outside the window. And he also said that he noticed that the window was closed. And he reported seeing some movement at the window, and this was thought to be Lashbrook. So the manager rushed in, called the police, who arrived and kicked in the door. They found Lashbrook on the toilet. He apparently offered no explanation for why the two were even in New York. He just gave his two different accounts regarding what happened to Olson that night. The hotel manager contacted the telephone operator to ask whether any calls came to or were made from the room that evening. The telephone operator said yes. One call was made from the room to a phone in Rhode Island. This call was presumably made to either Dr. Abramson or Sidney Gottlieb.
I do find it weird when the police get up to that room that he's sitting on the toilet.
Yeah, you would think that you would be in such shock.
Yeah.
Somebody just jumped out of a window right in front of you to their death. Now, could it have scared the you-know-what out of him? Maybe. People react differently. Maybe he got the bubble guts and, he had to run to the toilet. But it does seem strange on the surface to think that he's just sitting on the toilet. They have to kick in the door. I don't know.
I think you'd make a run downstairs to check on your friend.
Unless you had to go to the bathroom really badly.
Really bad.
Alice Olson was told only that Frank either fell or jumped to his death, and that it was officially ruled a drug-induced suicide. She struggled to get over the grief of losing her husband. She allegedly became a severe alcoholic following Frank's death. Although it's been written that she eventually recovered, Eric was only 9 years old at the time, and he would spend most of his life trying to solve the mystery surrounding his father's death. According to the Baltimore Sun, Alice Olson passed away in 1994. Eric wanted his parents to be buried next to each other, and he had his father's remains exhumed so they could be moved next to his wife. He also decided to have a second autopsy performed by George Starks from George Washington University. And this second autopsy uncovered some interesting findings. On the right side of Frank's temple was a large hematoma, a hemorrhage, but it's been said that this is not consistent with a 13-story fall. Another inconsistency is that the original autopsy noted scratches and cuts along Frank's body from going through the glass, but the second autopsy could find no evidence of any cuts or scratches. According to Wolves, Jackals, and Foxes, The Assassins Who Changed History, written by Chris Hollington, the simplest accident and mode of assassination is a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface. elevator shafts, stairwells, unscreened windows, and bridges all work. Bridges that fall into water are not reliable. In simple cases, a private meeting with the subject may be arranged at a properly cased location. The act may be executed by a sudden, vigorous exercise of the ankles, tipping the subject over the edge if the assassin immediately sets up an outcry, playing the horrified witness. No alibi or withdrawal is necessary. In these cases, it will usually be necessary to stun or drug the subject before dropping him. Care is required to ensure that no wound not attributable to the fall is discernible after death.
It's kind of like a how-to.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. I'm not really sure what this is exactly, but I do understand some of this. You know, this person is saying the simplest accident, and accident is in quotation marks, is a fall of 75 feet or more onto a hard surface. Can you spin it that somebody tripped, fell over a railing, they were drunk? Sure. I'm sure there are scenarios in which that can happen and has happened.
Sure.
Many times over the years.
As long as there's no surveillance cameras around.
But it's really the last part that I think, goes with the second autopsy. Care is required to ensure that no wound not attributable to the fall is discernible after death. So to me, that's kind of going back to this large hematoma that, at least according to, different outlets, would not be consistent with a 13-story fall.
Yeah.
So what are they saying? Maybe it's more consistent with somebody being hit on the head, knocked out, and then pushed over. According to the New York Times, Alice filed a wrongful death suit against the U.S. government. In 1976, she accepted $750,000 to settle the case. Frank's sons, Eric and Nils, later in 2012, tried to file another wrongful death suit. But the next year in 2013, a judge ruled that they couldn't because the case had already technically been settled back in 1976. I do think there are some people, maybe many people, who research this case, the death of Frank Olson, who come to the conclusion that he was killed by the CIA, the very organization he worked for. He was depressed. We've talked about it a number of times. His family saw it. Friends saw it. I think, he even disclosed it to his good friend. But just days before his death, it's thought that Frank told his boss he wanted to quit. Then he was allegedly covertly drugged and subjected to brainwashing techniques. MK Ultra was a vast and highly secretive program. Most of its documentation was incinerated in a Watergate-induced frenzy in 1973 to destroy condemning information. So it's hard to know the actual scope of the program. A few incorrectly filed documents were discovered in 1977 that provided some insight into this ultra-secretive MK Ultra world.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't want to have a lot of loose papers out there about this project.
No, especially after all that Watergate stuff. I get that. According to the SF Weekly, in one MK Ultra sub-project known as Project Midnight Climax, the CIA set up fake brothels in New York and San Francisco, staffed with sex workers charged with luring in men to experiment on and who would be too embarrassed to talk about what happened to them. The men were apparently given massive doses of LSD while staff observed their reactions through a one-way mirror.
What are you going to do? Say, hey, I think I've been
dosed at the brothel?
Right. That's probably not going to go over well at home.
No, you're not going to tell that to too many people. As described in an article in the Hectoan International Journal, the MK Ultra program also funded the experiments of Scottish psychiatrist Donald Ewing Cameron, as he developed his concept of psychic driving, an especially cruel form of torture, labeled the Montreal experiments or Subproject 68. Cameron experimented on patients who sought his help for ordinary psychiatric complaints like insomnia and anxiety, and without their knowledge or consent, put them into drug-induced comas, sometimes for months, while playing endlessly looping audio commands in an attempt to destroy and completely reprogram their minds and personalities.
It sounds very cruel.
It also sounds very, very illegal.
Well, yeah, that too. I'm assuming that it was automatically illegal.
That's a given, right?
And unethical, right?
And unethical, sure. As a result of this treatment, some who were exposed suffered total amnesia, while others forgot how to talk or forgot who their families were. Some people forgot how to use the bathroom.
Right there, man. Don't make me forget how to use the bathroom.
I mean, virtually all of these people were impaired in some way for the rest of their lives. So when we go back to Frank Olson, given some of the theories that have been put out about him, namely that some of the things he witnessed related to his work and how it was ultimately being used, does it make sense that he would want to get out of that? And does it also make sense that at the point he says, hey, I want out, the CIA would say, okay, you want out, but you've seen too much. You know too much. And so you have to be silent. These are questions, right, that have been posed by a number of people.
I think if he was unhappy, I just feel like it would be very difficult to leave that agency, knowing the type of work that he had done up to that point.
And the knowledge he had and the access he had. Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to your question. How do you leave that type of organization?
Yeah.
With the secrets that you know? Will they let you leave?
Maybe you're better off just underperforming. Maybe they'll just get rid of you. Like, yeah, he just doesn't have it anymore.
I mean, like put you on a program?
Yeah.
Until they ultimately get rid of you?
Walk you out the door.
So obviously that's one theory, right? That the CIA killed him to silence him, all of that. The other theory is that he was so depressed about what was going on, what they were using his work for, that he took his life. He willingly jumped out of the 13th-story window to end his life. Now, could there be more theories? I'm sure there are. But I think those are the two prevailing theories. He took his life.
Right.
Or the CIA took it for him.
I'm just thinking, with his knowledge, if he wanted to take his life, could he have found a better way to do that versus diving out of a window 13 floors up?
Yeah, I'm sure he could have. Maybe the other kind of side theory is maybe he was depressed, but had he been drugged to the point where he wasn't, really thinking clearly, and that played a role into jumping out the window. You hear people who have taken, I'm not saying LSD. I don't think I know anybody that's taken LSD, but taking things like acid, stuff like that, seeing strange things, feeling bugs on them, and then ultimately doing something because they're not thinking clearly,
right?
Doing something harmful. Could it have been, that type of situation?
And that seems believable, right?
I think you could make a case for a number of these things. Now, as far as what Eric Olson believes, he told the Baltimore Sun in 2012, the evidence shows that our father was killed in CIA custody. They have lied to us, withheld documents and information, and changed their story when convenient. So much like his father, Eric doesn't really mince words either.
Right.
He just comes right out and says it. Now, in 2012, he was also in the middle of a wrongful death suit,
right,
against the government. So does that play into it? I don't know that it does. I'm sure this is what Eric Olson truly believes.
Yeah.
That the CIA killed his father.
Well, his father was in their custody. However you want to look at that, right? He was staying in that hotel with another employee. So if you and I go on a business trip, yes,
then you're in my custody?
Well, if you were my boss and I worked for or with that company,
You would be in my custody.
You're my superior.
Okay. Well, that's true, regardless of what the situation is. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know. I guess the word custody is throwing me a little bit.
Yeah, custody means, he was under their
control. Like he didn't have a choice to do this or that. So I don't know. But, this is one of those cases as we wrap up. You could take it in a number of different directions. Obviously, we referenced a couple of books that have been written about, Frank Olson and the CIA and all of that stuff. And there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of stuff goes down.
Sure.
That we don't know about, that doesn't come out until years later. It gets leaked or some document gets unclassified or this or that. I mean, MK Ultra was a thing.
Right.
I'm sure Frank Olson, being in the position that he saw some bad things.
Yeah.
And, like you said, at what point does it get, to the stage where you don't want to deal with that anymore? You can't deal with that anymore.
Yeah, your conscience won't allow it.
Right. And you want to get as far away from it as you can. Now, if you work a regular job, that's pretty easy. You just walk into your boss's office or whoever and say, take this job and shove it, or I'm out of here or whatever. If you work for a 3-letter agency that is not UPS, because I think you could walk in and quit there too. Sure. But the 3-letter agencies I'm talking about, depending on what role you have, I don't know that it's as simple as just walking into your boss and saying, here's my 2-week notice.
Yeah.
I know all the secrets, but I'm leaving to go work at Baskin Robbins.
Yeah. I'm out.
I don't know how it works.
Yeah.
Neither one of us has officially worked for the CIA. I know you've had some subcontracting roles.
Yeah.
But
that's the way to do it.
I think that is the way to do it. But I don't know, man. It's, it is a mystery. We called it the mysterious death of Frank Olson. It is a mysterious death. Was it suicide? Was it murder? I think a lot of people are distrustful of the government in general, just by their nature.
Yeah.
And so, when the CIA is involved, and especially when we go back in time and we know there was this stuff going on, it can be natural for some people just to say, well, obviously they had a hand in it.
Yeah.
So, but the truth, I don't know how to figure it out.
I think you just walk away with your own opinion.
Yeah. Digest the information and form your own opinion.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is, why did the government, and President Ford was involved, because you and I saw a bunch of documents where he was involved in this $750,000 settlement.
Well, normally when you have a settlement, there's some level of guilt. What that level is, I don't know.
Or you're afraid to go further.
Yeah, you want to stop it in its tracks and hope that it gets just buried in, and forgotten.
And maybe that has something to do with it. Why some people look at this and say there was something going on, because the government just wouldn't give out $750,000 on a lot of stuff. They'll fight you tooth and nail.
Sure. $750,000 is a lot of money today. It was a whole lot of money back in 75.
Yeah, but it's a pittance compared to secrets not coming out that you don't want to come out.
Exactly.
If Richard Nixon could have paid $750,000 to make Watergate go away, do you think he would have?
He would have done it in a heartbeat.
In a heartbeat. Absolutely. And I think he tried, actually.
He probably did.
It just didn't work. All right, buddy. That is it for the mysterious death of Frank Olson. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Oh, man, Mike, I'm sorry. I'm really far behind. I actually don't know how far behind I am on the unsolved cases. I'm just listening to Melissa Caddick, the case of the quote-unquote financial advisor from Australia who went missing, and all they found of her was her foot in her shoe. And it turns out it's incredibly common. Probably lots of people have told you this, but it's incredibly common for entire feet to be found in athletic shoes, because the shoes that we wear are so synthetic that they don't break down. And so there are numerous beaches in America and around the world where it is unusually common for feet to who washed ashore, sometimes from hundreds or thousands of miles away. There you go. There's your fun forensic facts for the day that probably lots of people already told you about, but I was so excited that I had to tell you too. So stay safe, keep your own time tickets. Hi again, it's Carrie from Colorado. I forgot to say that last time. I just called you, then I had to immediately call back because you promptly disrespected Carrie Elwes by referring to him as the guy from Princess Bride. It's a good thing I was already Team Gibby.
Okay, so I love that voicemail. I wanted to play that voicemail. Yes, we've heard that from a lot of people. You and I also have talked about it for years because we've talked about cases in the Northwest.
Yeah.
I'm still perplexed by that case. Did she jump in? Maybe. Could she have cut her foot off and just thrown the foot in? Maybe. And she's walking around with a prosthetic foot. I don't know.
Yeah.
But how did I disrespect Carrie Elwes? He is the guy from The Princess Bride.
He is.
If you look up like his IMDb, it says known for playing Wesley in The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what it was. I just said the guy instead of saying his character or something. I love The Princess Bride. It's one of my favorite movies. So
just saw him in another movie the other night, something like The Unholy or something like that, where he plays a.
That sounds great.
It was not a good movie.
I'm sure it was not.
Not good.
No, I'm sure it was not.
So
I like The Princess Bride and I like Saw. He was in that.
Oh yeah.
He was also in Days of Thunder. So he's been in some good movies.
He has.
He's also been in like Hot Shots and some other not so good movies.
Yeah.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Jeanette from Washington State. I have been a listener and a Patreon since probably 2017. And I just wanted to say that I found it really funny today when I listened to your podcast earlier this week about the Phillip Island murders. You had an advertiser at the Starward Distillery, and I went to an event in Seattle, and it was for whiskey and Wild Bites. And what was the first whiskey vendor I came upon? It was Starward. And not only that, but the man in charge, he was the one serving the whiskey. And after he gave us his story about all the whiskeys, I told him about my story about hearing the advertisement on your podcast. And he thought that you guys are a great set of guys, and he couldn't believe how long you expounded about his whiskey. And he was going to tell his team that I had heard about you from the podcast and et cetera, and on top of all that, really loved their Nova single malt scotch. I had 8 tickets, and when I had 2 left, I went back and got 2 more of the Nova. So I just thought that was really serendipity. So anyway, keep your head on a swivel and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
Meow.
Yeah, I heard that.
But that is really cool.
It is cool.
You know, we have ads in the show. Ads pay the bills.
Yeah.
But we're pretty careful about who we partner with.
We do.
And it is really good whiskey.
Yeah.
I had a little bit, and then somehow I noticed that both of the bottles disappeared after you left when we taped.
Should we go to the next call?
Okay. And that answers my question.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. I am Kelly from Arizona. I just wanted to call and say thank you for everything you do for your podcast. I've been listening to you guys for years now. And actually, this past weekend, my friend and I had a pretty serious situation where we were actually being followed by someone. And I wanted to say thank you because of your podcast. I was able to kind of figure out and keep an eye on that. And pick up on kind of the weird situation that it was, and we were able to get out of there safely, thankfully. But I was definitely keeping my head on a swivel, and I attribute that to you guys. So thank you for doing what you do, and I look forward to hearing more.
I love to hear stories like that, Gib. Not that somebody is in a situation where they're uncomfortable,
right?
But that the podcast in some small way has kind of made them more attentive.
Yeah.
More
aware
to keep their head on a swivel. Cause I do think it's important without being too paranoid. I keep saying that. I don't want people walking around paranoid. I just be aware of your surroundings. I think it's important.
Just know what's happening.
Exactly. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All month long, the biggest movies are streaming free on Pluto TV's Popcorn Summer Movies. Watch star-studded blockbusters like Titanic and Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, or fall in love with charming rom-coms like Hitch and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. The best part? Pluto TV is 100% free. No credit cards, not even a sign-up. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies, TV shows, and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.